Oh. Sorry, my mic wasn't working. Y'all can hear me?
Yep. How old are you?
I'm 18 exact.
Okay. What shape is the Earth?
Huh? I didn't hear you.
What shape is the Earth?
What shape is the Earth?
Yes.
I would guess probably global.
Okay. It's acceptable. What do you got for us?
Well, I just see the question on the screen. Why do you believe in a God? I guess my answer to that would just simply be that I think it's more rational to believe in a God than no God.
Why do you think it's more rational?
Yeah, so there's multiple things that are, and whenever we look into like, alright, you know what, yeah. Whenever we look into like systematic beliefs and determine how things are truthhood, falsehood, and everything, we have undefined things and everything always in systematic beliefs. These undefined things can always be explained with a God, but without no God, some of them cannot be explained at all. That would be a systematic belief of rationality, I guess you could say. And then like other modal logic systems would probably support the claim of God existing.
Yeah, but at the same time, that's the exact argument of the God of the gaps fallacy.
God of the gaps fallacy?
Yes.
I mean, it's
basically, I have no explanation for this, therefore God.
No, okay, so the problem with the God of the gaps argument is that an ill-defined thing and pointing to a deity that exists on higher dimensionality encompassment would work as a logical framework. I don't see like the fallacious usage in that argument at all. If you can't give like an ill-defined thing that would have, I don't know, a foundationalized subject matter to prove why it wouldn't be God, or at least an equal interpretation, then I find it perfectly logically and analytically following.
But at the same time, you can't, or for instance, usually God of the gaps is used in correlation with things that the theist does not understand.
No, I mean, normal theists.
Just because you can't explain doesn't mean that God has to have done it.
Yeah, so normal theists, but whenever you hold the belief of like classical deism, it perfectly resembles the argument, which is my belief.
Sorry, I was reading a comment. Go on.
Okay, yeah. So I would agree that I wouldn't say like theists in general. I'm pretty sure almost any theist would probably point to a resolution or revelation of God if they have anything undefined to themselves. But from my perspective, I hold classical deism, which perfectly resembles my line of arguing.
I mean, so I won't necessarily say that there is no God, because I've had this conversation before, but it's the claim that it's more logical to believe that there is a God than not a God.
Yeah, that would be the assertion.
That's extremely subjective.
I mean, of course, I wouldn't say subjective if it's analytically and rationalism like proven.
No, because it hasn't been proven. If it was proven, then we wouldn't have these conversations.
That's why I said analytically and rationalism. I didn't say like empirical justification. I don't know if you're empiricalism, but I'm not. Okay. Rational. Wait, are you an empiricalist or a rationalist?
Depends. Either or.
Yeah. I find rationalist like the much more fitting one. Like I don't think everything, even like whenever we point to theories and everything, people usually use that to like, for example, like the space-time continuum that Albert Einstein built around of the space relativity and time relativity and all theory. People usually surround that by ideas and follow analytic truths and everything instead of empirical justification, because inherently a theory is not going to be empirically justified fully. It's going to be more of analytic and rationalist point of view, at least. So I'd guess like I'm more of a rationalism person whenever the debate of rationalism versus empiricalism comes to the sequence. But if you're an empiricalist or either or you don't have a stance on it, then I wouldn't know. Also kind of talking about God, like I don't think we would use empiricalist at all, like any like God framework at all, because nobody, unless you're arguing anecdotally, but that's also really weird to argue.
When it comes down to the discussion of God, you can't really use empirical evidence because no one can prove or disprove God.
Yeah, so like
I'm not here to disprove anyone of a God.
Oh, you're just questionable, like kind of like a Peroni.
Yeah, our question all in all is just Why do you believe?
Oh, okay.
And do you believe that your God is all good and all loving?
So, okay. So, for debate purposes, I would hold the
Well,
belief
it's
of
not
yes.
even a debate, we're just having a discussion.
Oh, well, yeah, yeah, yeah. Outside of like my debate or discussion purposes, I hold Christianity, and people argue that he isn't all good and all loving, but I argue that he is.
Why do you think that he's all good and all loving?
Well, multiple situations. Well, one is stated in like the Testament, so I would falsify my religion to believe said testaments are valuable. And other arguments that people bring forward, like other ways of, for example, whenever God flooded the world, or the Christian God, right? People argue that that's a sense of torturement to humans and everything. That the people that died was getting tortured. The way that I argue it is like kind of like a metaphysical way. These concepts of like dualism, whenever we see like things like torturement and peaceful, the opposition of those like binary systems and everything, and like dualism, God would theoretically be above those. So I guess from a very system belief, you can kind of argue, if you're arguing metaphysically, obviously, and he's theoretically above those, you could kind of argue that it wasn't inherently torture, nor would you side with the peaceful side. But in God's almighty will, he could probably side with the peaceful side. It depends on what you believe with.
But see, the issue with that is that as human beings, we have given God this title of being all good and all loving, whereas you said in the Bible that it says that he is, but in the Bible it also proves that he isn't.
No, in the Bible, well, about like normalization from like humans' ways of judgment, sure, like you can crucify that God isn't all loving, even like contradicting and pointing out the testaments how they have flaws, but in a very rationalist sense and everything, whenever you're speaking on the state of God, you can argue that it points out the contradiction of being very vague and misused, like the analogy I gave whenever he flooded the supposed world and everything.
Yeah, but I mean, so let's say from a personal standpoint, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you had to live during that time where God decided to flood the world, would you feel that he was all loving in that way, or would you feel tortured?
Well, it depends, because okay, I would say it depends in like two circumstances. If I'm arguing from a normalized perspective of human ideation, since supposedly humans are the one who gave God his property, which I don't agree with, so I wouldn't obviously argue from the human normalization point. I'll probably side with the God point, which would share the same property of God, holding the state that he is, the state of being, and holding the omnipowers that he does. So you can argue that metaphysically it would contradict the belief of torturement, and it would either be peaceful or non-peaceful, and it wouldn't be torture. Kind of
Have
like
you
a
ever
atheist.
have you ever been swimming and basically ran out of steam, fallen under the water, and felt lungs or water fill your lungs? Does that sound pretty torturous to me?
Yeah, that's a normalized way.
Well, that's the only way to look at it. As a human being, would you or would you not feel tortured by being flooded?
As a human being, I feel like there's
Yes.
two ways to look at it if you believe in a God. Like a normalized way of human ideation, and then like a God ideation, where you hold that God could do anything, and theoretically, if he could do anything, he can make torturement peacefully.
No. And even then, in the Bible, it even states that God himself did not do that. He flooded the world. He wiped it out.
Yes.
You're trying to throw out these what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. I'm saying, as a person, if you were living in that time and you got flooded, would you or would you not feel tortured because of the fact that, for one, the way you're about to die is extremely, extremely painful and psychologically damaging? I've known plenty of people who've drowned, and the intense feeling of fear that they have. So no matter how you explain this, as a human being, you would feel tortured.
If you argue from the normalization fashion, yes, I guess.
Okay, there's no if I argue from any point. I'm arguing as I am a person. If I drowned, that is going to be torture.
Yes, and that's arguing for the normalization fashion. Like I said, there's two ideas to be brought in the mix. If you're arguing like a fashion of normalization because of human ideation and the psychological movement presses that it's actually torture, then that's the normalization fashion of humans. If you argue from the God perspective, then you can theoretically hold that God could do anything. Therefore, if torture was not needed and flooded the earth, it can pinpoint the accuracy of like peacefully instead of like actually torturing and said drowning. which would go against human ideation normalization.
Okay, we're just going to move on from this subject because of the fact that neither one of us will be able to agree with each other.
Okay, that's fine.
Is sending out plagues to basically wipe out a civilization a form of love?
A form of love? You're aware what the plagues were for, right?
I know what the plagues were for, but the point is that love?
Did it lead to good?
All of this has a point that I'm getting to, so yeah, that's why I'm asking you.
I think the judgment is love in itself and good. Yeah, I think it's better than bad.
So sending out plagues to wipe out people is good. Yeah.
I mean, whenever you context it around that, then it probably seemingly seems like no good for people. Whenever you don't ignore the context behind. I mean, yeah, that's
there
what
is context in which doing that is a good thing.
No,
I don't care.
There's plenty of context. For example, whenever we have normalization of things, like whenever we was arguing this normalization fashion of people like scoping, like their human ideology, that they would scope this to be actually torture. Whenever we argue these things, that it's entirely a normalization thing, right? So like whenever somebody murders somebody's kid, right, and the dad of that said kid that got murders the other person back, people can accept that normalized as a justifiable moral ground. Like there's multiple ways you can ideal this and ignore the context. Like at the judgment end, then yes, it's good.
I just swiped down. Maybe that will get the sound better. He